Welcome to PCI Talk, where we keep up with the ever-changing world of communications and public relations with Public Communications, Inc. Join us as our team of professionals bring you along on our journey with personal stories and industry insider knowledge, from choosing an agency to crisis management and everything in between. PCI is a Chicago-based full-service communications agency serving clients that help our communities and the world in many industries, including healthcare, nonprofit, conservation, and more. Now, let's talk.
Hello and welcome everybody to PCI Talks. Today, we are talking about creating a campaign. I am Emma Bruno and I am joined by
Michelle Talbot.
So nice to have you on, Michelle. A little bit of background. I am a digital marketing coordinator here at PCI. So I work closely with all of our teams on creating digital content, social media content, and the like.
And I am the art director, graphic designer here at PCI, but I work on anything that needs to be designed, whether it's internal or client facing, or for the client going to the public. Any kind of design that needs to have done, usually it comes through me.
Michelle is knowledgeable on all fronts, so it's awesome to have her on here today. So we're talking about creating a campaign today. Let's start from ground zero. What is a campaign?
Well, a campaign is just a group of communication materials that hold together as a piece. I think that one of the biggest mistakes that people make, or because you're working in silos or you're working with different departments where things don't look the same. The more that things have the same feeling and have the same type of messaging, the better the campaign is going to hold together and the better your message is going to be told throughout all the different platforms that the campaign will run.
Absolutely. I think we can all definitely think of an example where we've seen something that looks very disconnected from the rest of the brand and you're wondering how it even made it here. Having a set campaign is important as you're creating materials. So diving into creating a campaign, what would be your first step as a designer to start off creating a brand new campaign?
Well, my first step is getting to know the client or the organization's brand. That's like number one. So whether I've worked with this client before or this is the first time that we're doing it, I will make sure I know all of their colors and their fonts and any logos that exist. And then I would research other campaigns and see which ones kind of worked for them. What type of mediums that we think we'd want to do. Usually when somebody's doing a campaign, there's usually a list, like we want to do social media and we want to do posters or things. I don't like to limit myself for that. Of course, I would include that, but I always love coming up with things that a client didn't even think of that could go with the campaign. Another thing that I like to do is create a mood board, because a mood board helps the client understand what we're going to make this look like and how it's going to feel, and it's kind of like doing a temperature check. Like the client would be like, yes, this is exactly, how I wanted this to feel. And then also it's really good that when you're like 6 months into a campaign, you can go back to the mood board constantly and always kind of remember where you started. So
awesome. Is there a specific place that you feel like you pull inspiration for mood board from? I know at the beginning of every year, I'll be like, okay, what do I want my, 2022 to look like? And I'm on Pinterest finding a bunch of ideas. Do you go to Pinterest when you're looking at
I was just going to say, I go to Pinterest. That's like 1000%. I go to Pinterest. I love looking up palettes with Pinterest because they'll show like, I'll be like blue palettes, and they'll show these beautiful photos. And then that photo leads to another photo and leads to another. The other thing I do is I'll go to the client's Instagram account, because usually those are the most visual. Facebook and stuff, a lot of times they're not as visual, but usually Instagram accounts, and I kind of see the type of imagery that they use. And then, of course, I go to the website and I see what kind of images. And it's always great when some companies or organizations have like nothing for brand guidelines, which I'll actually create because you really need that. And then others have very extensive brand guidelines where they even talk about like the personality of a photograph of a person. So that's where I start. And then it gets you excited when you look at a mood board, like what you were saying, like for the year, you get excited because you're like, oh, I can see it.
Right, absolutely. It gives you an idea of where the rest of the project is heading. Most of the time, I'm sure you're like right on the money and they're like, yes, this is exactly what I'm looking for. Do you ever have clients that are like, I don't know, I feel like we might have missed the mark on this?
Mood boards are like, I don't know what it is, but everybody loves mood boards because it's like, it's not a set thing. Like there's no writing. So as long as you did your research and you know what they're going for, they're usually excited because they see their own vision in the mood board. So mood boards get everybody excited. So I really like doing that. If I could start with a mood board for everything, I would do it.
I love that. So step one in creating a campaign is doing your research so that you can create a mood board to ensure that you're encompassing everything that the client's looking for, different colors, imagery, all of that. Now I'm excited. I'm like, we should have done a mood board for this podcast. I love it. So after you have your mood board, you've got the client excited. Where do we head next?
I think where we head next is the other thing I always do whenever I'm like, if it's a program, I'm like, let's do a logo. And it doesn't have to be a logo. It could be a mark, or it could be something that will live in every element. So you know it's about this campaign.
Okay.
And I love, and also it makes the campaign special. You know, it's not just something that you thought about yesterday. It's something that,
it's the ribbon tied through the whole campaign.
Exactly. Yeah. And it ties, you could be doing things like, different types of photographs where you have people or you have just colors. But if you have that campaign logo or message or tagline, that holds it all together. I also like to always show what it would look like with their logo so that we all kind of, again, not working in silos. If there's multiple departments or multiple people working on it, they all stay consistent in how they use the program or campaign logo or mark with the actual organization or company's logo.
I don't often think about just, as not a designer myself, I don't always think about, oh, maybe we need a specific mark for this campaign. But I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, the ones that do have something special really feel like they are full campaigns and not just different materials, in the same color palette. They really feel connected. So now I'm going to be thinking about that when I'm looking at different campaigns. Now it's like I'm on a hunt to see whether there's a tagline or a logo. That's really wonderful. I like that.
And it also helps too with recall, especially with social media and with digital ads. It goes so fast and people like see things in like a blip. And if they like recall, it's like, wait a minute, and it kind of will stop people in their tracks. So it's always kind of good to keep the rhythm going of those same elements that people can remember, like, oh, I saw that before.
Wonderful. So now I'm feeling like our campaign is being created. We've got the look, the feel of it. Now, what comes next? I'm assuming that we are actually going to start creating elements for the campaign. So what does that mean?
Yeah. So once you get that and you get the logo and the campaign, like maybe tagline, then you figure out what the medium you're going to be doing. So usually what we do now is there's going to be some kind of social media posts. So you figure out what what platforms, which is usually like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and then possibly LinkedIn. So you have to figure out which platforms you want to do it in. Then there's digital advertising, which is Google advertising, traditional advertising, there's marketing materials, there's many different things. When I design things, I usually do it in a program called Illustrator, and I use a giant artboard. And I'll be creating a social media post, but then I'm like, okay, how is this going to translate to a skyscraper vertical ad? So then I'll jump to the vertical ad, and I'm like, okay, well, I need to stack this differently. And then I may go back to the social post, because that everything affects the other. And if it's a traditional advertising, again, I'm always kind of jumping back and forth for all the elements, because sometimes things don't translate the best in other sizes and things like that. So I really I'll do something as if it's a giant table and I'm just moving my pieces around. And then you start honing in. That's kind of like where I start. And then also, one thing that I think I do too is you forget like a call to action, which is the most important thing, because why else are you advertising? So that's kind of a big thing. You got to have the looks, they know who this message is coming from. They know what the message is. And then there is a call to action. They know what to do next. So that's basically the main things that the piece that you did for the campaign needs to have.
I think that's interesting what you said. Just to circle back on, when you're creating, you start with a huge artboard and you start to just build out social posts, everything all on one board, so that you can see it all together and how they look side by side. Is that correct?
Yeah. And then the mood board is off to the side of the table where I have all my palette. So I'm always just being able to grab, I only grab those colors. And then the
Right.
palette may extend, because then I'm like, I need to have some more secondary colors. I'm always working on this big table, because then everything is holding together.
Awesome. Yeah, I know I have even been creating social posts for a client, and I'm starting off, I'm making them for specifically Facebook. So, of course, we've got the horizontal graphic that I'm creating, and then I have to translate that to the square on Instagram. So I can only imagine that when you are also adding in like out of home or like marketing materials, just how cognizant you have to be that it's going to look great on all mediums. So,
And some mediums are extremely different. We don't, at PCI, we don't deal with a lot of outdoor, like giant billboards and things like that. I did a campaign that had all of that in direct mail for Children's Memorial Hospital, which is now Lurie's Hospital. And we did that thing. We had the logo, and we came up with where kids come first. And that was in everything, even in the radio. We always ended that where kids come first. And it just it all held together. And it all started the same way with a mood board that just showed what the tag was, what the look was going to be, the type of feeling it was going to convey, and things like that.
awesome. So now, once you have started creating all of your different imagery on different social channels and, marketing materials, you have it all together, you make sure it looks like one cohesive brand. Then do you turn it over to the clients and say, here's what we've got, let me know what you think? Or how does the editing and feedback process work from a designer's perspective?
Well, of course, we have internal, because I got to make sure I'm crossing all the, what do you say, crossing the T's and dotting the I's, especially with at PCI, we deal with a lot of digital, and I need to make sure I'm communicating with the digital team to make sure I'm using like the proper hashtags, and is this the best size? Usually, like, when I work with the digital team, they'll tell me what the best sizes are. That's where I start to have where I start working in tandem with the internal team. And then once we do that, then we can go to the client. And one thing that I do, which I like, when I'm presenting something, it is very close to what it's going to look like. So the client knows exactly what they're going to see. And also it helps in production, where I'm not like having to recreate the whole thing to get it ready. It's just usually fine tuning, making sure sizes are correct, if it needs crops and bleeds, like all the technical production stuff. When we show the client, it's pretty close. And usually there's rounds, which is fine.
Right. So there's no surprises when it comes time to launch a campaign. The clients have a great idea of what materials are going to be launched because they've seen it. We have stuck to what we promised them, what we've talked about throughout the whole process.
Yeah.
So at that point, you hand everything over to either our team, the digital team, to post, or what does it look like for some of the other marketing materials? What does the delivery of those look like?
Yeah, like I will either usually I work with the account person that would hand things off if it was for a magazine publication. I go in and I find out we find out together what the magazine specs are, when the due dates are, and either depending on how it's set up, I will send it directly to the publications. If it's like a direct mail piece, I usually work with the printer, and we'll send it to the printer, and traditional things. I'll approve proofs. I always see proofs because you never like go, okay, it's done.
Right. Absolutely.
So yeah, so usually the digital stuff just kind of goes through your group over there, and but anything printing wise, I usually see that through.
Absolutely. So is there one medium that is like your favorite to create for? Like, do you love creating billboards? I know you don't do a lot of that, but is there one specifically that you find that you're like, this is my jam, I love creating for this?
It changes throughout. I've been doing this for like, I don't know, I'm going to say over 30 years. So I've just adapted with all the different mediums. I think early in my career, I did a lot of product design, and that was really fun to do. Like actually coming up with, I used to do graphics for Bell helmets, and then I'd get to go to the trade shows and I'd see people buying them. And I came up with like a toy, and I would do movie posters, and then that translated to when I moved to Chicago, I did mostly TV, print, and outdoor. And that was all exciting and fun. I just feel like throughout the years, there's been different importance on different types of mediums. And
Absolutely.
I've learned to adapt to those. But the things that I like to do, which has always been since the very beginning, is coming up with something completely unexpected in a campaign that the client didn't even think that was like what? I don't like doing, like we just recently did something for the Glen Ellen, where it was a race or something, and we were going to do like the grab bag or something. And I don't like anything that's like stock. I'm like,
right.
We got to come up with something more than a grab bag, because people just kind of throw those away. So I came up with, because it was a race, I'm like, why don't we have bananas and then put the sticker with the hashtag on all the bananas? And it's perfect because, it's recyclable. People are going to use it. And if it makes somebody feel good, it will. And I like that because it's not like you could use that for anything else. It's
right.
like,
yeah, how delightful. Like that's something so unique and probably caught people's attention because you don't always see, branded bananas like that.
Yeah. And it's not like we're going to ever probably do this for anybody else. That's what I love doing. I love doing something that the client knows that we really thought about this, and we didn't just do our stock
Right. It's not just a cookie
poster,
cutter
flyer,
campaign.
this. It's not just a list. You may start with a list because the client says this is what their needs are, but we're always thinking of what's the best way to do this and maybe do something that's completely unique um, and the client owns it. So that's what I
Absolutely.
like to do the most is coming up with these little, I mean, it's like doing a banana sticker. I mean, but it was fun because it was fun.
I love that. Can you tell me a little bit about the process of creating a call to action? Because I know that you want your call to action to stand out so that it's not just blending in with the rest of what you have going on, but you still want it to look like it's part of the campaign. So, how does the call to action come together for you most of the time?
Well, it's different for everybody. Usually it's a website link or we're asking people like use this hashtag or something like that. And other things that it can even go to is um, creating a special landing page. So we have like a portal that the people can go to. So again, that's even something we're controlling. So you go to the landing page and it has the same look as the campaign so they know they're in the right place. Or it can be a special email that we created for people to go to. So again, I like branding even the call to
URL.
action. Yeah, the URL, of course, all the hashtags. But I like to make the call to action special and also make it obvious what we're asking them to do. If they're going to donate, if
Absolutely.
we need them to donate, if we need them to sign up, it's got to be completely specific, not just click. You gotta
Right.
you gotta get them, passionate about what they want to do, especially like for the donation type of stuff. With conservation, we do a lot of that, and I like to be very clear because we did something where there was a movie that was made, and it was like it was the premiere of the movie, so we had many different calls of action. It was like leading up to the premiere, then watch it live, then it's like then there was the donation case for support. So sometimes they change depending on the lifespan. um, but I like to be very specific because that's what you measure. I mean, that's the bottom line. If everybody's seeing it and nobody clicks or nobody does the call to action, well, then the campaign really didn't do its job. It may
Right.
look nice, but you got to get them to do the next step.
It's definitely important that you start off with what's the objective, what goal are we trying to accomplish, and then how are we going to measure that? I feel like that's where my team comes into play, especially on the digital side of things, is deciding, okay, for our social media, for example, on Facebook, what key performance indicators are we going to be measuring? Is it going to be, clicks to the website, impressions, how many people have seen these ads? What is important for this campaign? So, I mean, depending on the goal of the campaign, if it's an awareness campaign, well, then great. We just want to get that in front of as many
Mhm.
eyes as possible. And people are going to love to look at the beautiful things we've created. Or if we're more worried about conversions, then tracking our click-through rates, how many people followed the call to action and went directly to the link. Those are different things where for different campaigns you're going to measure different things. Do you have any other thoughts on measuring campaigns?
Yeah, there's also testing them, do different messages and which ones tracked because campaigns usually don't just all drop on one day. It's
Right.
usually it's got a life expectancy. Some of it's like in the entire year. So the reason to measure is so you can course correct and change things, or if something's working, you go and do that. And like when I was doing a lot of direct marketing for like big like credit card companies, we would do like 20 different um, messages. and they all have codes at the bottom. This was before like social media, and we would track, depending on the call to action would be different for every single one. And then we'd be like, okay, this was the top, and then they'd roll that one out. So I like doing test things. I'm always asking, how did this do? How did this do? Because I want that affects how I'm going to keep doing the campaign, or if the year campaign is over and then we're rolling out a different one or a new one or a refresh, it's always important to see how the other one performed, because you want to do the things that were working. You look at that and maybe pull things with that, and the things that weren't working, you just, yeah, you don't do that anymore.
Right. No, and I know for a lot of the social campaigns that my team has worked on, we've done A/B testing. I know actually on a couple, I just finished up a Google display campaign I was working on, and we were doing A/B testing. So we had a graphic that included a little call out that said register now, and then one graphic that didn't include that. And we just wanted to take the first 30 days of our 90-day campaign to let both of them run, see where we were at, and then once we let both of them run and we could see which one was more well received, we said, okay, we're just going to stick with the one that does include the call out because the click-through rate was, X, Y, and Z amount higher. So I guess my question is, when it comes to like A/B testing, do you usually say, here are two graphics, two options that you can use, or most of the time is it a client coming back to you and saying, hey, we would love another option? Or how does A/B testing work from a design
It
perspective?
seems like we kind of been doing it internally. Design wise, it would be more of like, is it more emotional using photographs of like, is it the photographs of the patients or the doctors, or, depending on the organization, or is it something that's more graphic and text based, that hooks, that draws people in? Um, Most of the time, it's the emotional connection. If you can connect with the consumer, and how they feel, those are usually the ones that are the most successful.
Oftentimes, unless there's some kind of emotional connection or emotional response, nobody is going to take any action. Therefore, your call to action is mute. So making sure that whatever materials are created, they invoke emotion in the viewer, I think is probably one of the most important parts of any campaign, because whatever the goal is, you want people to do something, either be aware of your product or service, or follow a certain step, click through to a website. And they're not going to do that if they feel apathetic towards the content that's in front of them. So I think that's a really great point.
Your campaign is, you're not trying to reach everybody. That's why it shouldn't be generic. It needs to be as direct to your target as possible, because that is who you're trying to get. You don't want everybody in the world. You want the people that you're trying to talk to. And
Right, your desired target audience. So I
mhm.
guess before we start the actual creation of of campaign materials, it's important to decide what the goal of the campaign is, who your target audience is. Another thing before you start a campaign is, what's your budget? Like, if you're going to be doing digital advertising, you have to have, a set budget. If you're going to be buying Facebook ads, we can't just be going crazy and charging the clients credit cards. We've got to decide a proper budget before the materials get in your hands, Michelle. All of that should be squared away.
And also, campaigns can have multiple targets. Sometimes it's just one, I guess, but a lot of times it's more than that, especially like with, doctors versus patients versus talking to moms with kids. Different targets but it's still the same campaign, but they're not all going to look alike. It should still all work together.
Yeah, that's a great point, is maybe you're not going to use the same verbiage when you're talking to moms with newborn babies as you would when you're talking to delivery room doctors, where it might be the same brand, the same overall message, but the tone that you use, maybe the color palette that you choose for doctors versus those patients is going to be completely different. But you may have that campaign mark that ties it up through all social channels or all targets that lets you realize that this is all part of the same campaign. Well, Michelle, I want to thank you so much for walking us through your process of creating a campaign. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And do you have any final thoughts here on creating campaigns?
No, I think I kind of said it. I just, again, I just always like to be as unique as possible. If you're going to put it out there, then do something good.
I love that. I think that's what makes our campaigns at PCI so special, is they're not just cookie cutter campaigns that every other agency or every other client is putting out there. We put a lot of thought and consideration into what we put out there, and I definitely think that it shows. And also thank you for joining us on the podcast today, Michelle. It was lovely to speak with you.
Oh, well, thank you. So I hope that somebody learned something, or they are excited.
Please like and subscribe on all of our channels, and check out PCIPR.com for more PCI talks. And Michelle, I hope we hear from you again soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to PCI Talk. We'll see you next time. And in the meantime, check us out on social media for more insider information.